Drex here from Drexfactor Poi, sharing with you the love of poi spinning and flow arts to benefit your body and brain, and today I'm giving you the fascinating history of one of my favorite classes of poi tricks, third order motions. Before we dive in, I just want to give a quick shout out to the friends of the channel. Big thanks to Dark Monk, Flow DNA, Flow Fests, Flow Toys, Juggling Calling, Pyroterra Light Toys, Spinballs, and Ultrapoi for helping to make the videos on this channel possible. You can learn more about all these amazing companies and the work that they're doing to support flow artists like yourself by checking out the links that I've got down in the description of this video. Third order motions. This is definitely one of those types of poi tricks that we could argue is a little bit heavy on the jargon. What are first or even second order motions? What is an order for that matter too? Happily, this is one of the few poi tricks that I can give a solid definition for, because the guy who coined the term, Damien Boy-Bouvier, came up with a really detailed and solid definition for it. So, according to Damien, a third order motion is a poi pattern created by nesting three different orbiting bodies upon each other in such a fashion that each new body orbits around the previous one. That's a paraphrase. His explanation is a lot longer, and don't worry, I will link to it down below if you want to check it out for yourself. But there's some stuff to unpack from that, so let's take a moment to do just that. Let's start pretty simple here and just show the poi spinning around your hand in a static spin. We would call this a first order motion because there's only one orbiting body. That's the poi head spinning around the hand. Keep in mind that we are keeping track of two individual objects here. Your hand, which isn't really moving at all, and the poi head, which is orbiting around it. Okay, now let's take a look at second order motions, or as many people like to call them, flowers. Here's a very commonly used one. We call this a 4-petal anti-spin flower. Now we have a situation in which your hand is orbiting around your shoulder and the poi head is orbiting around your hand. This results in a plethora of different possibilities for poi patterns that you can create. For example, I can now have the poi and hand both orbiting in the same direction. If I do this in such a fashion that they complete the same number of beats at the same time, I wind up with an extension. Both poi and hand are performing a single beat going in the same direction. But if I reverse the direction of the poi, I wind up with a very different pattern, something we sometimes call a linear isolation. And if I reduce the size of my hand path down to the diameter of a single poi length, I wind up with a pattern we frequently call a cat eye. There's some disagreement over whether we should really call these two patterns flowers, but that's outside the scope of this video. For now, what I want you to keep in mind is that in second order motions, you have the option of the secondary orbiting body, or poi head, spinning in the same direction or opposite direction relative to the primary orbiting body, or hand. So let's apply that to some things that we can all agree are flowers. Remember our 4-petal anti-spin flower from just a minute ago? This flower has the poi head completing 3 downbeats for every 1 downbeat that the hand performs. But like the linear isolation or cat eye, the poi head is spinning in the opposite direction as the hand, clockwise versus counterclockwise. If I reverse the direction that the poi is spinning in, but still maintain 3 downbeats for every 1 beat that the hand performs, I now wind up performing a 2-petal in-spin flower instead. The big takeaways? Whenever you have 2 different orbiting bodies like this, you have access to a variety of patterns that can be either in-spin or anti-spin, depending upon whether they orbit in the same direction or not. In addition, the types of patterns you generate depend heavily not only on whether they are in-spin or anti-spin, but also on how many downbeats each body has relative to each other. Okay, so now let's take it to third order motions. Now we want to think of there being a third orbiting body involved in this scenario. Just like we did when we shifted from static spin to flowers, we're going to add this third body between our first body, that is our hand, and the one that is orbiting around, that is our shoulder. Some people like to think of there being an invisible body here that they're just inferring exists, while others like to think of it as the elbow orbiting around the shoulder and the hand orbiting around the elbow. Either way though, now our hand is performing the same patterns that the poi was just a moment ago. So what happens to the poi now? Well, it's complicated. And to get a real answer, we have to answer a second question as well. How many downbeats do we want it to have? Is it spinning in the same direction as the hand, or the opposite direction? For right now, I'm going to keep it simple and just say that the poi will spin in the opposite direction that the hand does. So this pattern will be what we would call anti-anti-spin, if that makes sense. And I'm going to perform 5 downbeats with this pattern. Why 5? You'll see in a moment. So here we go. With our hand tracing out a 4-petal anti-spin flower and our poi head spinning opposite to it, I wind up producing a pattern that you're almost surely familiar with if you've been spinning poi long enough. It's frequently called Zhan's diamond. Awesome! So we can see that a third order motion is basically an expansion of the same idea as flowers, but that we get more complex patterns out of it. Furthermore, this concept is behind one of the most recognizable poi patterns out there. Now there is a whole lot more to dig through when it comes to third order motions and the possibilities they open up, but I want to stop for a second to talk about where and how the idea first emerged. It took us a while to put those pieces together, and you know what? It took the poi world a bit of time as well. And the things that we now call third order motions started off as something very different back in the day. Let me show you how we got here. So this story begins back in 2008 with the publication of a document by poi legend Cyril Human. At the time, the poi world was abuzz with uses for a trick called a linear extension, essentially moving the hand back and forth in a straight line while the poi spun around it for a single beat. Many people had realized that by chaining linear extensions together, you could produce ever more complex patterns, and even that you could use them as a tool for teaching anti-spin flowers. But Cyril went down a rabbit hole thinking about all the different ways in which he could create different shapes out of straight lines and publish them in a paper called Spinning and Geometry that, once upon a time, found its way into the eager hands of this neophyte poi spinner. In it, he shares a radical approach to thinking about timing and direction from the perspective of symmetry and the shapes that they produce, as well as a host of different patterns that can be created with linear extensions, including this pattern right here on page 9. Look familiar? It will in a few moments. Cyril even created a video around these concepts that used mirror images as well as post-production trails to show off many of the patterns that he was talking about. Reading this paper had a huge impact on me as I was coming up as a tech spinner, but Cyril wasn't the only one exploring these ideas, though he was the first one to publish them. Another spinner exploring patterns with linear extensions was Zhan Moore. And it's here that I think you'll finally recognize that pattern from Cyril's paper. It's the same one that Zhan used to blow the minds of poi geeks everywhere in his video, Arizona Poi Transmission. As a result of the cool overlay and overall influence of this watershed video in the tech poi movement, it would come to be associated forever with him and dubbed, that's right, Zhan's diamond. So I should point out for a second here that nobody was more surprised that the trick was named after him than Zhan himself. He knew of and respected Cyril's work as well as others and has never claimed to have invented this trick himself. In the conversations I've had with him, he actually comes off as being kind of perplexed that it came to be associated with him. But I guess that's what comes from making a really influential video sometimes, huh? But now, this pattern was not only in the popular consciousness, but a fashionable move to learn for young tech spinners all over the globe. And you might be noticing right about now that I've gone through all of this history and I haven't said a single word framing it as a third order motion. Well, that's because nobody at the time thought of it as one. The term third order motion wouldn't even be coined for another 2 years. In the meantime, lots of people started tinkering around with this pattern that Zhan had showed off in his video. In his Fires Festival video from 2009, Russian poi spinner Ivan Melgorbanov showed off a variant that he had turned into an anti-brid, and for the first time, people started to notice, wait, that path that the hand is taking in Zhan's diamond looks an awful lot like a 4-petal anti-spin flower. And the following year, Mel would show off still more variants in his landmark Red Pants tech video. And that set off a spark of recognition for Damien. Damien was already used to playing around with patterns that are modeled on the concept of having 3 different objects engaged in periodic motion. He'd already laid down the basic theory behind caps after all. And here he saw another application for this type of mathematical thinking. He broke down both Mel's and Zhan's work from the perspective of nesting orbiting bodies instead of connecting linear extensions, and something really incredible emerged. It also does bear recognizing, when both Cyril and Zhan were creating their patterns out of linear extensions, they were absolutely not thinking of them as patterns derived by extending the properties of flowers. That idea was kind of applied to them in retrospect. And that's okay. Sometimes later generation of spinners find new ways to interpret old ideas that take them off in completely different directions. Both the original intent, as well as the new interpretation, are both valid. Zhan's diamond kind of became a generalized term for any algorithm involving the hands moving through 8 edges connecting 4 vertices. Zhan's original version, of course, wasn't a third order motion at all. At the time, he framed it through a term that's now fallen out of favor: an elliptical cap. But now we do have Damien's framework. We have the name third order motions. So what can we do with them? The short answer is a lot. Here's a very small sample. One of my favorites is an antibrid that takes a triquetra and extends it with a third order motion that adds 2 petals at each of the petal tips of the triquetra. This pattern doesn't have a simple label or nickname, so I'll just refer to it as an anti-anti-spin triquetra third order motion. Yikes, that is a mouthful. And I can take that same third order motion, but use it with both hands at the same time, creating a split time opposites pattern that I personally think looks really cool. But these are all anti-anti-spin patterns. Shouldn't there also be anti-in-spin patterns and in-anti-spin patterns? Yes, but they're very rarely used. For example, here's Zhang's diamond performed not in anti-anti-spin, but in anti-spin. I've added an in-spin petal at the end of each of the core 4-petal anti-spin's flower petals. This gives us a 7 downbeat pattern. But how about anti-in-spin? Well, here is one such pattern based on a 2-petal in-spin flower that, like Zhang's diamond, features a 5 downbeat anti-spin pattern over top of it. Pretty wild, right? So by now you're probably noticing that because these patterns are so complex, performing them in such a way that there's something for the audience to latch onto can be a bit of a challenge. It's not impossible, but it can take some work. This is probably part of the reason why only 1 or 2 third order motions ever became common. And I will also say I consider third order motions to essentially be the limit of how complex a pattern can get before the audience just loses interest. But that said, that doesn't mean that we've uncovered all there is to find here. Play around with them. Maybe you'll find that cool new pattern that we will all want to learn ourselves. In the meantime, check out the links that I've got down below to all the resources I could find links to in compiling this video. And if you got anything out of this video, please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to help other people find it, and of course, to help my channel grow. I also just want to put out a huge thank you because this video would not be possible without the kind contributions of these wonderful folks right here. These are my Flow patrons over on Patreon, and they, along with the wonderful people listed down in the description, make this video and all the videos on this channel possible. If you'd like to help me out in my mission to bring poi spinning and flow arts to the wider world and help people learn to be creative with their bodies and their brains, you can do so by heading over to patreon.com/DrexFactorPoi and signing up. You can get early access to all of my content, a say in what topics I tackle in the future, plus some behind the scenes and extra content as well. So go check that out. Please and thank you. What poi trick or concept do you want to see me drill into with my next poi explainer video? This is a format where I dive deeply into the history of a given idea to see how it emerged and what the influences on it were. They take a lot of research, but they're also a fun way to keep track of our history. Do be sure to step outside today and take a flow break, and I will see you on Friday with a new video. Peace.